Tonight the signal bends west across windswept fields and stone-walled villages of Ireland. The frequency trembles with a cry carried on the night air, a sound that has haunted generations. It is not the howl of storm winds, nor the wail of grief you know from the living. It is older, sharper, a voice that pierces the veil between life and death. The signal has locked onto it now, a tale told in whispers, feared in silence. Lean closer. Tonight, you will hear the Banshee.
Picture a road in Ireland. Narrow, hedged by thorn and stone, shining with a sheen of night mist. The moon is a sliver, and the fields are breathing. Grass tilting in slow waves, cattle shifting in far paddocks. A gate complaining once without a hand to move it. The village lamps sit like little islands of ember along the lane. Somewhere, close, but never quite near, water runs over stones. Listen, that isn't wind alone. There's a note under it, thin as a hair, sharp as a needle, that threads through the hedges and touches every eave. The old people will tell you, when that sound comes before the knock, someone's time is near. They call her the Banshee. In Irish, Bean Sida, the woman of the Sida, of the fairy mounds. A herald of death, yes, but a herald who mourns. She is not a killer, not a curse sent by enemies, not a thing with claws and hunger. She is a voice. She is a grief that walks. They say you never forget the first time you hear her. It can come at the end of a long day, boots off by the fire, a child finally quiet in the cradle, the dog asleep by the door. And then it arrives, as if the house were only a shell, and the night had decided to enter. Sometimes it begins like a sigh at the window, just a shape of sound, as if a woman stood on the lane and could not quite speak your language, but had so much to tell you. Sometimes it's the swift, silver cry of a gull, but inland, at midnight, where gulls never fly. Sometimes it's unmistakable keening, Cawe Need, the old funeral lament, the rhythm of grief that older generations would understand, even in their sleep. People will rise, candle in hand. They'll open the door a finger width, crane their head out into the damp, and see nothing. But the sound moves, to the far hedgerow, then back to the gable. Then, God help us, to the eaves just above their own room, settling like a cloak. And somewhere in the lane, a neighbor moves behind a curtain. The light shifts. The village holds its breath, in stories, meaning rides on names. Bean Sida, woman of the mounds. The Sidi are not graves, but ancient places, the green humps where the old ones live. In the older thinking, the world is layered. Our roads and hearths above, and beneath them, another set of rules, another kind of light. From those places, messengers come. The Banshee is one such messenger. Not a fairy in the garden sense, not light and daytime pretty. She is threshold. She stands at the hinge between breath and beyond, and her work is not to end a life, but to announce the end, to prepare a house for it. It is said the Banshee is bound not to all people, but to families, to names woven deep into a place. Some say she keens for old Irish lineages, names with O and Mac, names married to parishes for hundreds of years. Others say the binding is made not by blood, but by belonging, those who rooted themselves long enough to grow a sorrow worth singing. In certain parishes, they speak of family banshees. She cried for my grandmother's people the night before every death, someone will tell you, eyes steady, not asking to be believed, but refusing to be contradicted. There are as many faces to the Banshee as there are stories. Often, people never see her, only hear. But in the old tellings, she may appear in 3 ways. First, as a young woman, paisley, with hair like river water, a dress that clings like mist, eyes salt bright as if she had been crying forever. She stands by a gate, or halfway down a lane, or on the far bank of a dark stream. Second, as a middle-aged woman, a matron with strong hands and a shawl pulled tight, hair streaked with gray, a face that knows bread and babies and burying. She is the shape of ordinary sorrow. Third, as an old woman, a hag, if you must say it, bent, hair wild, eyes fierce as peat fire. She carries a small comb, sometimes of bone or horn, and if you find such a comb on the road, leave it. To take her comb is to invite her to your window, and that is an invitation you cannot rescind. Some say she washes the shroud of the soon-departing in the river at night, her white sleeves soaked, wringing the cloth till it gleams. Others say the washing woman, the Bean Nie, belongs to the Highlands of Scotland, cousin to our Banshee, kin in work if not in name. Stories travel. Grief does too. There was a time when keening was part of our daily rituals. Women who had the gift for it, called in to shape the house's grief into something bearable. A keen is not simply crying. It has a form, a rise and a breaking, a low, shaken trough, a long-held note that lets the body empty itself safely of what would otherwise drown it. The Banshee's cry is the echo of that old art. If it chills the blood, it's because the blood recognizes it. It is a sound tailored for the human chest. It finds the place where sobs begin, and it sings right through it. That's why people clutch the bedclothes when they hear it. That's why lamps are turned low, and even the dogs creep close to the door. Some insist the Banshee repeats names in that cry, syllables you will only understand when it is too late. Others say she speaks no word, that grief is older than language and more precise. In Limerick, an aunt will swear to you that her mother heard the Banshee the night before her son's ship went down. 3 calls at the eaves, and then a sound like fabric tearing, long and low, and without any breath in it. In Offaly, they tell of a cottage on a slight rise, where the sound came not from the lane, but from the hearth itself, as if the cry were drawn up through the chimney and laid across the rafters. The neighbor, brave in daytime, wouldn't enter that house again after dark for years, though the family were kind to her and fed her when times were hard. In Kerry, there's a jag of road along a small river, nothing grand, and a narrow bridge of old stone. On fog nights, drivers switch off the radio at that curve and listen. The river's chatter, a fox, the steer down in the meadow. And then sometimes, maybe once in a winter, a note as thin as glass. They don't tell the children. They don't put it on the parish page online. They just lift their foot off the accelerator and pass over the bridge with a hand at the wheel and another at their chest. In these stories, nobody runs. Nobody chases with a torch. The sound teaches people how to be still. Because people crave tidy tales, the Banshee is often miscast in modern telling, turned into a creature with fingers and appetites, with punishments and tricks. In the oldest stories, she is none of these. She is not a vengeful spirit seeking retribution, not a huntress. She does not duck behind stones and leap onto backs. She doesn't scratch. She doesn't strike. She sings. There are stories of malefic things that imitate her, of course. Other entities that borrow the mask of grief because grief is powerful. But the Banshee herself keeps to her lane. Announcement. There is a mercy in any warning, even when warning cannot save. If there is a danger here, it isn't from her. It is from us. How we answer a warning. How we treat each other on the edge of the last hour. There's no iron charm against her, no prayer that will make the night snap shut and take the sound with it. But there are ways, not to banish, but to behave. First, do not shout into the dark. The old ones say you must not curse the cry or mock it. Disrespect has a way of finding its way back to your own door. Second, light one candle, not all of them. Set it in the window. It is both a vigil and a signal. We are listening. We are not alone. Third, if a name comes into your mind, unbidden, frightening, speak it gently into your hands and lay them over your heart. The old thought was simple. Love is the only bridge the living can build in that moment. The rest is for the other side. And afterward, because there is always an afterward, bring tea. For the household that sat up all night. For the neighbor who heard it too and pretends she didn't. For yourself, because breath must be taught how to move again. A thing that can be forgotten in the talk of omens is that the Banshee's work is grief. A singer is not her song, but the song comes through her all the same. If she cries, it is because someone must. There are versions, quiet, not eager for argument, that suggest the Banshee binds herself to a family out of love. An old mother who went before, perhaps, a grandmother who would not leave, an ancestor whose work in the world was to comfort, and who refused to drop that work just because her hands had let go of weight. Imagine it, your house, your lane, your name. Imagine your people on the edge of their last sunset, and you on the far bank now, still wanting to keep faith, still wanting to do the good work. You cannot stop the tide, but you can warn the boats. It is a tender heresy that the feared herald might also be a keeper. Across the sea, the bean-nye kneels in the highlands, washing the garments of the soon departing in a stream that hurries without hurrying. In Wales, a woman's cry on a lonely lane can make a man set down his plate and walk out to stand at the hedge like a sleepwalker. In Brittany, a voice rides the cliffs, and fishermen do not untie their boats. Call them cousins if you like, sisters of a kind of work that crosses borders without passports. In each place, the task has shape, the washing, the comb, the cry, the nearness to water. Water remembers. It holds voices longer than air does. It is a fitting place for messages. Some scholars will tell you the Banshee is ancient, older than any church on Irish soil, rooted in a time when wailing women were not a curiosity, but a necessity, when there were arts for helping grief move through the body and slide safely out into the world. In such an age, is it not reasonable that a story would take that role and make her a person, so she could be thanked and feared and recognized? Stories are how we make jobs visible. Family banshees are the hardest to prove and the easiest to feel. Ask in certain parishes, and you'll hear the same quiet note in voices that don't know each other. She keened for us, not once, not twice, but often, across decades. There is a pattern to those tellings. The house usually holds 3 generations. There are pictures on the mantel, first communion dresses, a soldier in sepia whose name still walks on holidays, a wedding where the cake was a little lopsided and nobody minded. These are houses that remember themselves. The Banshee does not attach to money. She attaches to memory. So when you hear that someone has the Banshee, the correct response is not horror, but respect. To be kept is not to be cursed. It matters what we call a sound. Describe it badly, and you estrange it. Describe it precisely, and you make space for it. The Banshee's cry is often high, but not squealed. It is long, but not shouted. It begins like the breath before a sob, edges up into a thread, fine keen that finds the notch in your ribs, and then it breaks, just a little, like a line pulled too tight and then eased, leaving a hum in the air that you feel more than hear. There can be words, but if there are, they fall apart as they travel, like leaves on a stream. What arrives is shaping, not syllables. If you are unfortunate enough, and blessed enough, to hear it in the open, you'll find it does not travel like ordinary sound. It moves as wind moves, beginning nowhere, arriving everywhere. All this sounds like poetry until it doesn't. A skeptic hears a fox's bark and says that must be it. A skeptic hears a woman's sorrow from 2 doors down and says the lane carries sound in strange ways. Both can be true. Foxes bark, lanes carry, and yet, ask the people who've had the cry arrive the night before the knock. Ask them if a fox can place a hand on the chest of a whole house and make it still. The world is not embarrassed to be larger than our habits. The Banshee does not require belief. She requires listening. We can talk about acoustics in daytime. At night, we listen. There's a story told in a village I won't name to protect the privacy of those who live there still. It was a small farmhouse near a stream with a back kitchen of stone and a front room of warm wooden boards. The family had done well enough that year. Nothing extravagant, but enough to put good bread on the table and tea in the tins. In that house, a mother lay ill, not with anything dramatic, just the slow kind of illness that changes the light in a place. One night, the cry came. Not at the eaves, not at the bridge, at the cradle. The sound was so soft that the men did not hear it. The child did. The grandmother did. She put her hand on the side of the cradle and said one word, a name that belonged to the ill woman and the mother before her. Her daughter looked at her and understood, because there are understandings that do not ask for speech. They sat together. They moved quietly, preparing things without announcing they were preparing them. When the dawn came, the mother reached for her child, kissed her hands, and breathed one last time. The neighbors who came that day said nothing about the cry. They brought bread. They brewed tea. They cut flowers from their own bit of garden and put them in an old jar. And in the evening, when the men were back from the fields, someone told a story. Not about death, but about the day the mother learned to bake and burned the first 5 loaves to black stones and laughed and tried again. This is what the Banshee is for, not fear. Readiness. Rare are the tales where she's seen. Rarer still, where she turns her face to you. If it happens, here is what the old advice says. Do not approach. Do not speak ill. If you must speak, say I hear you. If you can manage more, say I will sit with them, or I will call the family, or I will make the tea. Because her work is only half the work, the rest is ours. If you are tempted to chase, to drag the night to the ground and make it explain itself, remember this. Explanation is a daytime luxury. Night asks for conduct. Even now, phones in our pockets and schedules stitched into our bones, the old lane remains. It is simply paved differently. The hedgerows have turned into hospital corridors, the stone cottages into nursing homes, and the hearthside vigils into the glow of city flats, where families sit up all night. Ask a nurse who works the late shift. They will tell you about the hush that sometimes falls across an entire ward, as if the air itself has grown heavy. They'll describe how people, family or stranger, rise almost in unison, pulled to a bedside without knowing why. Someone makes tea. Someone calls the priest. Someone whispers, "It's time." Others will say they've felt it walking the sterile hallways, an invisible draft that seems to move with purpose, tugging at the curtains, circling the bed, pausing just long enough to make the hairs on your arms stand. Not frightening, exactly, just inevitable, as though death had already entered the room and the rest of the world was only catching up. In these modern places, the Banshee doesn't always keen in the old way. She adapts. Her cry folds into the shuffle of feet in the corridor, the sudden silence of machines, the tremor in a nurse's voice when she tells you gently to sit down. Her presence endures, even if her voice now wears the masks of our age. And this, perhaps, is the truth. too often lost. The Banshee is not cruelty. She is not terror. She is preparation. The shape grief takes when it chooses not to strike alone. To hear her cry is to be told, "You are not unprepared." It is not mercy in the way we wish for. No reprieve, no bargain. But it is mercy all the same. For what is harder than being caught without warning, with no chance to gather, no chance to say the words you meant to say yesterday? Some whisper that the Banshee is born of mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, those who carried the burden of loss so fiercely in life that they refused to lay it down in death. Instead, they stayed, choosing to walk with their descendants into each dark hour so that no one would face it blind. If this is true, then her cry is not simply sorrow. It is love, stretched thin across centuries, worn but unbroken. Think of it this way. When the Banshee cries outside a window, she is not heralding some stranger's end. She is naming someone's father, someone's sister, someone's friend. She is marking that life with song, however sorrowful, so it does not pass unnoticed. In a world that hurries, where death too often arrives behind closed curtains and sterile doors, the Banshee reminds us of something older, that to leave is an event worthy of sound, worthy of acknowledgement, worthy of presence. Her cry unsettles, yes, but it also demands reverence. It says, "Stop. Listen. This moment matters." So if ever you hear her, whether in the quiet fields of Ireland or in the strange silences of modern nights, do not think only of fear. Think of memory. Think of love unwilling to be quiet. Think of a song that carries across the veil, a song that is older than words.
So, you heard her cry, wanderers. The sound that splits night from silence and tells you no prayer, no candle, no iron charm can turn what's already moving toward you. The Banshee does not come to bargain, and she does not come to warn, only to mark the inevitable. But the signal doesn't just drift to any story, it chooses. And tonight it chose her, because grief leaves echoes. Echoes that ripple through centuries, carried on winds that remember more than we dare. Some say these cries are tethered to ancient families, bloodlines touched by something old and unspoken. Others whisper the Banshee isn't alone, that other voices in the night hum alongside her, songs swallowed by static, bound to things best left sealed. And if you've been listening closely, you'll have noticed the signal keeps returning to places where sorrow and secrecy overlap. A faceless ghost in Japan, a headless rider on Irish roads, now a keening woman by the reeds. Each signal isn't just a story, it's a thread, and the threads, if you follow them far enough, begin to knot. But that, wanderers, is for another night. Keep your lamps trimmed, your gates locked, and your radios tuned to the static, because the next signal has already begun to stir, and when it calls, you'll hear it too.